Hi everyone, welcome to another beginner's die cutting video. I'm going to be using the circles dies again. I've already used these once to make another birthday card. I will leave that link in the top right hand corner if you want to check that out. But today I am using the exact same circle die set I used before and the exact same stamp set, so no new things here. Now to start off with, I have an A2 top folding card base. I also have a panel that is slightly smaller, so it measures about 4 inches by 5¼ inches. The card base measures 4¼ by 5½. Now I'm going to be cutting some balloons out of this card base, so I'm going to be using my circle dies. These are just regular plain circles from a nesting die set, but like I've said in the previous video, use whatever you have on hand. If you have a stitched die set, you can use that. If you have maybe a smaller nesting die set, you can certainly use that. But I am using 3 different sizes. I have a larger, then a more medium, and a very small one. For the largest one, I'm going to be cutting it out of that panel in the very top center. The other 2, I'm actually going to be cutting from some scrap white cardstock. I do want to I can get rid of the center of the largest one, but the centers of the other 2 I'm actually going to keep and layer up. So I've secured those down with some painter's tape, and I'm going to run them through my die cutting machine. I use a Big Shot, and my platform is the multi-purpose platform, or my sandwiches multi-purpose platform, both tabs down, a cutting plate. I like to put my paper down with my dies on it with the cutting side facing down. You can do up if that's what you're more comfortable with. And then I'll place one more cutting plate right on top, and I'll send that through my die cutting machine. Now I can do all 3 of mine. My big kick still has tons of pressure in it, sometimes too much if I'm being honest. So I can run all 3 of these through. If you can't, that's fine. You can do them separately. Now, like I said before, I can go ahead and get rid of the center of that biggest circle, but I do need to keep the smaller 2 ones. I'm also going to be hand cutting some little tails for these balloons, essentially, are what they are going to be. So I'm using just some small scissors, and I'm cutting kind of a triangle with a flat bottom and rounded corners, and also no point on top. That's all that is. So if you can just cut a triangle, round your 2 corners on the bottom, it doesn't have to be a perfect one. It actually looks a little bit better wonky. Those are my 2 bottoms for my smallest balloons. On my largest one, I'm going to be using a pencil to draw this out. Again, I'm just going to eyeball this. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, and it certainly doesn't have to be perfect. If you've ever looked at the bottom of a balloon, they are not perfect at all. So once I had it pretty much where I wanted it, I'm actually going to be coming in with my craft knife to cut this out. You can use your scissors if that's easier for you, but for me, my craft knife is just a little bit easier. I'll just follow those lines as best I can. I do want to cut out the majority of the pencil marks, so I'm going to cut slightly outside of the lines. That way I don't have to worry so much about erasing and having a little bit of a gray cast on my paper. So I'll cut that out very quickly, make sure I go all the way to the end of the paper so I don't have any ripped edges, and I'll pop that out. And if you need to, you can go back over this a few times just to make sure you don't get those ripped little pieces in there. And then once I have it all cut out and away from the cardstock, I can pop that out, and I've got the tail to my balloon ready to go. It's that simple to make your own balloons from your circle dies. Now, that is pretty much what I'm going to be doing for the die cutting. But I want to add some color onto these balloons. You can do this so many different ways. You can use sprays, you can use inks, you can add some stamping behind it and do some pattern stamping to fill in your balloons. It really is up to you. I'm going to be using Distress inks and make these pretty simple. These are basically a blending ink that I like to use to add color onto things where I want to blend on color. They are also very reactive with water, so you can watercolor with them. You can make splotches on your paper. They're very versatile inks. I'm using 3 colors here. This is going to be a boy birthday card, so I'm going pretty standard what I normally do. I've got some Mermaid Lagoon. I'm using also some Twisted Citron and some Spice Marmalade. I could not remember the name of that orange. But I am using my mini ink blending tool to blend that color. I'm starting off with the darkest in the bottom left hand corner, and I'll blend to a lighter shade towards the top right. Now I have marked out where my balloon is going to be, and then to keep the edges of my card nice and white where I'm going to have a little bit of that card base peeking out, I've added some painter's tape around there. That's going to save me from having any ink on those white edges. And that's just a little trick I like to do, especially whenever my panel that I'm going to be overlaying is slightly smaller. It's a great way just to keep the color off of your mat. Now, like I said before, these are a blending ink, so you want to start off with a very light hand. Start blending and building up your color. These can take a while to build up, especially some of the lighter shades, but if you start off with a very light hand and blend up, you won't get any harsh lines. So I like to keep my, or in this case, I'm keeping my color in the bottom left hand corner, the darkest, and I'm blending lighter towards the top right. That's just going to give me a nice little shadow, and I'll make sure I do that on my other little balloons as well. I keep overlaying that panel on top just to make sure I have the color as dark as I want it, and once I do, I can go ahead and remove that painter's tape. There you can see my edges are still going to be nice and bright and clean, but I've got that color exactly where I need it, so I have some color to my balloon. Now on my next color, or on my medium circle, I'm going to actually be adding some Spice Marmalade. With die cuts like this, where you're going to be touching them a lot to hold them, grab an extra piece of cardstock and hold it down with your fingers with that cardstock. That's going to keep smudges from getting on your little die cuts. These react not only with water, but they'll react with the oils of your fingers. So you'll get fingerprints, and then it just turns out it doesn't work. So just use a little piece of scrap cardstock to hold it down. So again, I started off in one corner, made sure it was a little bit lighter on the other corner just to keep with the whole card theme. Now on the little bottom of the balloon, the little tie part, I guess you want to say, I'm going to add a little bit of color as well with my mini ink blending tool and the same color ink. I really didn't worry about any shadows or anything on that. For my final, very smallest balloon, I'm going to be using Twisted Citron. I want to flip my paper over at this point because I started off with my darkest color. You don't want to pull any of that orange into your green, and it will pull. If you start blending on a page where you have a ton of ink, it's going to pull onto your die cut. So again, I started off on one side, made it very light, and then I'm going to blend out to a lighter shade. And that's just going to keep with the whole shadow theme. I want to make sure that I get a little bit of color on the bottom of that balloon as well. So I'm going to add a few ounces of the Twisted Citron onto it. And then it was time to start putting everything together. So before I go on to doing that, I want to make sure that I get the tails onto the balloons so I don't lose them. I'm using Ranger Multi-Medium Matte. I'll just add a little drop of that onto the top of the balloon. So make them a little bit longer than you actually want them. That way you have some place to adhere them onto the back of the balloon. I'm adding another little drop onto the green one, and then I'll put it on my little green balloon or circle die cut, and there you have some balloons ready to go onto your card. It was that simple. Now to make sure those stay, I did add a large acrylic block on top just to hold them in place while they dried. I added some Fun Foam and double-sided adhesive to pop up and give that dimension onto the back of my panel that has the balloon cut out on it. And then I'm going to go ahead and peel that off and place that right over the top. Now the other two balloons I'm going to be putting on top of that to kind of fill in the space and layer them up a little bit. And you can pop those up even more, so you can add multi-layers of the dimension, but I'm just going to keep everything one layer just because some of my cards need to go through the mail. I don't want to add so much that you can't fit this through the mail slot, or it costs a little bit extra to, well, I don't mind that. I just don't like to send really big bulky things through the mail. So once I had that backing paper all removed, I'm going to go ahead and place that right over the top. You can't really erase those pencil marks that you put down to mark out your balloon, so you do have a nice guide of where it needs to go. So whenever you make those pencil marks, you want to make sure they're pretty light whenever you put them down. Now, every tail or every balloon needs a little tail, something, a string to hold on to it. So again, I'm using some multimedia matte. I'm placing down a very small dot of it right where the balloon and the base meet. I already have some little baker's twine bows all tied up ready to go, and I've left a very long string on them. I'm going to be connecting those to the bottom of the card. There's a closer look at those bows all tied up, nothing fancy. I just tied very quick bows, left a little string on one side and a longer on the left. Now, to connect those to the bottom of the card, I forgot to turn back on my camera, excuse me, but I use the Quickie glue pen. I just put little drops down and then I placed an acrylic block on top, and that held the little baker's twine in place. There's a closer look at those. You don't even see the glue, and those are held very nicely in place. I snipped them off with some scissors, and then for my sentiment, I'm using that Paper Smooches Sentiment Sampler stamp set. I stamped it with some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink on a piece of scrap white cardstock, and I cut my own banner. All you do with that is cut a strip of paper, cut up the center, and then cut from both corners toward that center cut, and there you have a banner. You can also use a die cut if you have it, but I just hand cut mine very quickly. And that finished off that card, and it was so super simple and easy to do. Sorry I didn't have the end of the video. I did forget to turn my camera back on, but it was very simple to finish off. If you have any questions, you can always leave them down below and I will answer them as best I can. But here are a few final pictures of the card all put together. Absolutely love the way this turned out. I didn't need balloon die cuts. All I needed was a few circle dies that I already had on hand. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, there are a few links on the left side of your screen you can click on. Thanks so much for watching, and happy crafting.